Welcome to this Gifts of God talk today on Sunday. So happy to have you with us. And today I did a little differently something with the podcast. And I think it may happen this way more and more because sometimes Sandra has her own things that she's doing. And I don't always want to disturb her and bring her out of that. And then what I notice is sometimes, the podcast gets put off till the afternoon. And then sometimes we don't find the space to do it. Well, so that whole pattern ended today when I said to myself, I'll just do it myself. I'm here, I can do it. And so sometimes it'll just be me giving the podcast. And I think that's okay. And it went very smoothly. And I got a lot out of it myself. It's almost like I was able to go deeper into a silence with just the lesson, with just the reading, and make that contact even deeper somehow. I don't know, but it felt that way. So there will be some times where I'll be making the podcast with just myself if Sandra's doing something else. So I hope that's okay for you. And because on the road, it's even more demanding and more of a challenge to do things like podcasts on a regular basis. So I may need that way of doing it while I'm on the road. So we'll see. We'll see what unfolds. So thanks for coming today. I wanted to read this one paragraph. A couple days ago, we did this section. It was from section number 10 in chapter 15, the time of rebirth. And I think you probably noticed it's been talking a lot about sacrifice and the giving up of sacrifice. I mean, even the one today was Christmas as a time of giving up sacrifice. So this notion of sacrifice, I think we have to really understand what is the Course saying and what is it we're doing that is a sacrifice that is preventing us from making that contact, all right? So I just wanted to read this one paragraph just because it was so powerful. And when we read it, Sandra said, "Oh, you need to share that with the group on Sunday." And it's from this section, the time of rebirth, and it's talking about sacrifice. It says, "It's not necessary to follow fear through all the circuitous routes by which it burrows underground and hides in darkness, to emerge in forms quite different from what it is. Yet it is necessary to examine each one as long as you would retain the principle that governs all of them. When you are willing to regard them not as separate, but as different manifestations of the same idea, and one you do not want, then they go together. The idea is simply this. You believe it is possible to be host to the ego or hostage to God." Now, I want to stop there because what's actually happening in our mind, in our ego mind, is we have the whole thing upside down. We think that the ego is the source of our love and going to give us what we want. And we think that God is going to require a sacrifice from us or want us to do something we don't want to do. Like, yes, we all say we want to become enlightened, but we have this notion that God is asking us to do something that is against our will. And that the ego is the will that we have where where we can just direct it however we want, so there's no restrictions, no this or that. But it's actually the other way around. The ego is that part of our mind that wants us to pay for things, sacrifice for quote unquote the good. And God is the one that's not asking for any sacrifice. God is just saying, well, my will for you is perfect happiness, and you already have it within yourself, and it costs nothing. But it's the ego that gives us all these, hoops to jump through, sacrifices to make, special relationships where we have to be in codependency, like I'll give you this if you give me that. Those are all relationships of sacrifice. So we have it upside down. We think we're a host of the ego and a hostage to God, when really we are host to God and being held hostage by the ego. You see what I mean? So this paragraph is making this one point very clear. And sometimes, like in another section, it did make it clear that you are host to God and hostage of the ego. But the ego would flip it around and want you to think that you're host to the ego. When we think of a host, we think as someone, delighted to serve, and only joy is going to come from this good visitation. And a hostage is someone being held against their will. So we think the ego is who we should host, and the God is holding us hostage. So we've got to look at this. The idea is simply this: you believe it's possible to be host to the ego or hostage to God. This is the choice you think you have, that and the decision you believe that you must make. You see no other alternatives, for you cannot accept the fact that sacrifice gets nothing. Sacrifice is so essential to your thought system that salvation apart from sacrifice means nothing to you. Your confusion of sacrifice and love is so profound that you cannot conceive of love without sacrifice. And it is this that you must look upon. Sacrifice is attack, not love. If you would accept but this one idea, your fear of love would vanish. Guilt cannot last when the idea of sacrifice has been removed. Well, that's the other condition of sacrifice, is someone has to be guilty here. And anything that requires you to give up something, be in some sort of pain as a payoff, guilt is always involved with that. Either you feel guilty that you would take that on, or you're projecting that out on someone else, that they would have to give you something that maybe they don't want to give, and that would be, guilty if they didn't. And so guilt and sacrifice go together. For if there is sacrifice, someone must pay and someone must get. And the only question that remains is, how much is the price, and for getting what? As host to the ego, you believe that you can give all your guilt away whenever you want, and thereby purchase peace. And the payment does not seem to be yours. Yet it is obvious that the ego does demand payment. It never seems to be demanding of you. You are unwilling to recognize that the ego which you invited is treacherous only to those who think they are its host. The ego will never let you perceive this, since this recognition would make it homeless. For when the recognition dawns clearly, you will not be deceived by any form the ego takes to protect itself from your sight. Each form will be recognized as but a cover for the one idea that hides behind them all, that love demands sacrifice, and therefore inseparable from attack and fear, and that guilt is the price of love, which must be paid by fear. All right, so I think that's pretty clear. And, there are sections in the text that require we read them and then read them again and then read them again and sit with them and see how that soaks in, This notion of sacrifice, I'm not sure we fully understand how much we've been actually the hostage of that thought. And I think we have to get clear that it's the ego that holds us hostage, not God. We are the host of God, and the host is something that would produce only perfect happiness. God's will for me is perfect happiness. It doesn't say God's will for me is to have to sacrifice something to get the perfect happiness. No, it just says God's will for you is perfect happiness. The perfect happiness is already yours. It's already within you. And anything that would not be happiness, if you look at it closely, there's probably some fear, guilt, or anger associated with it. And ultimately, there's probably some sacrifice associated with it. And that is definitely not love. And it's definitely not God's will for you. So Jesus begins to correct all the false theology that we were taught in our churches, where they said Jesus had to sacrifice his life to you because you were such a sinner. And that doesn't make us feel better. That makes us feel worse. So it's trying to clear that whole notion up, that there was no sacrifice made. And then what established Jesus as the Christ was not the crucifixion, it was the resurrection. The fact that he didn't make the crucifixion real, he didn't hold any grievances towards anyone who did those terrible things to him. And because his forgiveness was instantaneous, he was able to overcome death. So that's the whole premise of the Course. Forgiveness is the key to happiness. Forgiveness offers everything I want. Today I claim the gifts forgiveness gives. Forgiveness lets me know that minds are joined. So this forgiveness is the end of sacrifice. If Jesus really felt that he was sacrificing himself, he would have to automatically have made those people bad and evil and, be projecting guilt onto them, which he didn't. So he didn't have the notion of sacrifice. He said, well, yeah, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. And of course, they didn't know what they were doing. They weren't in their right minds. They were with their own ego minds, projecting fear, guilt, and anger onto him. But he didn't then return it back, And I think that's the challenge, whenever we're in a situation where in our relationships with people, they're trying to project something onto us, our immediate response is defense, perhaps anger, perhaps irritation. And it's kind of a counterattack, If we feel attacked by someone else, what's our first response? Well, defend ourselves, deny it, attack back. There are all kinds of things that the ego has got used to doing. But as students of the Course in Miracles, we have to catch ourselves and not do that. Not do that. So we had a situation yesterday, and I want to share a little bit because I think I need to work it out. We had this old friend years ago who had taken the LRT, and he was kind of a businessman, but not really. And for a while, Sandra had him doing some of her tasks or organizational tasks. Well, and we hadn't talked to him in a long while. And he's our age. He's like in his 70s. And he's been studying how people that are in our generation, and we were very much involved in what they called the New Age, and how the decline of that has taken place, the decline of the quote New Age, and those teachers that were teaching in that era aren't as prominently out there as they used to be. And then he was trying to tell us that rebirthing itself was not relevant. I'm sure if we would have carried the conversation even farther, he might have said study of the Course in Miracles is not relevant because it's all from that era, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, when that New Thought movement was very strong. And it's a work that we're still doing, okay, with people of various generations. I mean, a lot of the people we have are the over 50, over 60 crowd, but we also have younger people doing our work. And so we feel that it's very pertinent. And if it's something timeless, like the Course in Miracles, it's like it never is impertinent. It's never not valid, So that's our position, is that there may not be as many people interested perhaps as there used to be, but there still are people interested, and it still is good work to do. And our rebirthing breath work that we do with people is very effective in helping them move through their issues, move through their whatever it is they want to heal in themselves, and help them with their relationships. So we feel our work is very relevant. Well, he wrote us this text saying, oh, you can't market what you're doing anymore, and blah, 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 and it's people don't want to hear that. Well, to me, I must say, I got a little defensive, and I wrote him back and I said, well, I don't see the truth like you see it. And there was kind of a breakdown in the relationship. And I don't think it's going to be restored because he has a mindset that's going a certain way, and we have a mindset going in a different way. And I think sometimes we're given these tests, all right? So, I mean, certainly I could see that the methods of delivering teachings and self-development programs that we offer have changed. And I think we're keeping up pretty well with online things that we do. I mean, right now, this is an example of that. 5-10 years ago, I wouldn't even conceived of having a program where we meet with people every week on this platform, but now it's kind of a common thing, and people are used to getting their information, getting their even classes like this online. So I think in some ways we have kept up. And I think as far as what we share, the material is timeless, and what we teach is timeless. It doesn't have a shelf life. It's always going to be relevant to human beings, no matter what their age, no matter what their nationality, no matter what their stage in life is. And we feel very strongly about that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's okay to have a different view with someone, and it's okay when a relationship ends and that relationship doesn't contribute anymore to your work, and you don't seem to contribute to their life and work, and it's okay to let it go. We hadn't actually seen or talked to him in maybe 5 or 6 years, and Sandra was trying to kind of revive something, but then we saw how not on the same page we are with the whole thing. And I went through a little bit of kind of grief of letting go, but I think it's the best thing to let go in those situations. And you may have similar situations with people that you just have to let go of and move on, because you're not in the same mindset. Well, that being said, I think the Course in Miracles is very challenging, but at the same time, it's very giving. And what I noticed this morning when I did the podcast by myself, there was a very strong presence, all right? There was a very strong presence as I was reading, and I was also kind of thinking of you guys on the other side. Well, who am I talking to? I'm talking to you guys. And then who am I talking to when I'm reading it? Well, you're talking to Jesus when you're reading the Course in Miracles. It's just a fact. It's like every word in the Course is his voice coming to you. So just by reading it, even silently, you're having this dialogue with the Christ. And that is a very real thing. It's not like an idea. It's a palpable communication, right? And your mind is communicating with his mind. And yes, you need a body to read the words and all that, but the body's not, it was even saying this morning in this section, the body is not the determiner of the communication. It's the mind that's doing the communicating. And I think that when you go very deeply into what the Course is saying, you feel those moments where your mind actually does connect with the Christ, and you have this kind of synergy between his words and between what they're saying to you, and the clarity comes in, and the grace comes in, and the miracles come in, because those are miracles. Those are miracles when you feel that connection, right? So I must admit, in the last few weeks, I felt a little disconnected. And, it was after we got back from the India Quest, and we had such a wonderful time on that with 27 people, and we were so high. And then coming back and spending a month home preparing for Europe, I fell into a little bit of a disconnect, right? And I've been feeling that for a couple of weeks. And then I had a rebirthing session with our friend Pile, who's one of our India Quest assistants, and I worked through some of that. Some of that was back at my birth, when I was induced and I got really angry. So I was still working out some of those pieces of my birth. But anyhow, when I read the Course this morning, I felt like I turned a corner, and I had some direct feeling of this contact. And I think that we have to have that. It's essential. And I think if there's anything different about the way I share the Course as opposed to the way anyone else might be sharing the Course, it's that my teacher, Tara Singh, demanded that contact. It's like he would say, the Course in Miracles is not to be learned. It's like we've learned so many things and we know about so many things, right? We're in, educated Western society. We've all been to universities and we've all filled our brain up with so much information, and we know so much about almost everything. But it's like he would call it knowledge of about. And he said, knowledge of about is not the actual thing. Like I could know about a glass of water if I'm in the desert, but knowing about the glass of water doesn't feed my thirst. I need the actual glass of water, right? So we've become very content with only the idea of something about something. And because now we know about it, right? And we've stored all this knowledge in our head, but we haven't necessarily made the contact with that thing. And in this case, with the Course in Miracles, that thing is the Christ mind. It's the Christ speaking to us. And it's very essential that we make that contact. So then it ceases to be knowledge of about, and it's a direct relationship you have, and it's your own direct discovery. So the miracle is like imparted to you by the Christ through the medium of the Course in Miracles, and you actually receive it, and you actually have that relationship with the Christ. Now, and that is essential. And any other study group of the Course in Miracles that doesn't demand that, or doesn't see that that's the ultimate connection you have to have, then it's just like a waste of time. It's like we tell people, if you read a book and the author doesn't understand that your thoughts produce your results, and negative thoughts produce negative results, and positive thoughts produce positive results. If the author doesn't understand that, the whole book is off. So I would say with the Course, if we don't understand that it's the Christ talking to us, and we have to make that direct contact and that relationship, then it's just back into meaningless thought. Even reading the Course can be meaningless thought if we don't demand of ourselves to make that contact that's direct. And that could be how this Gifts of God program is different than other quote unquote study groups of A Course in Miracles. And I've always kind of aspired to that, because I would say I received that from Tara Singh. He would not have shared anything about the Course if he didn't have that direct contact. And if he didn't feel like he had it, he wouldn't say anything. There would be periods where he would spend 2 or 3 weeks in silence. Well, even before he started sharing the Course, he spent 3 years in silence. So he knew how to use silence to undo things in himself, right? He would take these periods of silence, and then he would come out of that with the contact and something new to share. And those things, I never heard him repeat himself. For 17 years, I would listen to his lectures, and he never said the same thing. And he never had a note. He never had a pad with anything recorded. It was just totally spontaneous, and it was always in the moment, and it was always exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. And how did he do that? Well, he had the contact. He had the direct line, his communication line was fully open. There's that lesson, I think it's in the 70s. What is the Christ? 271 to 280 is like, what is the Christ, right? And there are some key lessons in there. And one of the lessons says, the word of God is given me to speak. All right. The word of God is given me to speak. Well, that's what the Christ would do, right? Anything that the Christ would say would be something that came from his creator through him to communicate. So that would be a word that he would say, and it was directly from the source. And so his channel with the source was totally open and totally true and totally with that divine connection. And that's why he could say, well, the word of God was given me to speak it. And that's how we have to get as students of the course. Like, if we're bringing it into application, then whatever our thoughts are thinking, there's another lesson. It says, my mind holds only what I think with God, right? That's a review. Some of you are going through that. My mind holds only what I think with God. Well, then if you're thinking with God, naturally, if you were going to speak something, we speak what we're thinking, right? We speak what we're thinking. So if you're thinking with God, then it would follow that you're speaking those words that God gives you to speak. And so then you're in that contact and you're in that consistent, line of the Christ receiving the word and then speaking the word, and it's a true word, and it has the power to affect people, uplift people, change their minds, get them lined up with their divine connection. So it has transformative power to do something. But we first have to demand that contact in ourselves. And that's something that a teacher can't really teach you that. He can point the way, and he can demonstrate in himself that he's doing that, which for me was obvious from Tara Singh, because there would be moments where I would feel this force field of stillness around him and in the room. So if I would enter to have some conversation with him, I would immediately go into a different dimension in my mind, and that stillness would envelop everything in the room, right? So, and I had direct experience of that. So I know that he was in contact with that kind of line of communication by the fact that I felt that way. I felt this total peace, this total stillness, this total silence in his presence. And it was so, it was almost so abrupt. Like if I would walk in the room and he was there, I would feel like that, this other energy. It would go from maybe I'm just, kind of scattered and thinking about all kinds of other stuff. And then I'd enter the room, and then immediately there would be that stillness. And I knew it was him transmitting it. Nobody else was transmitting it. I didn't feel that anywhere else. So why did I feel it with him? Well, because he demanded that of himself, that he made that contact with the Christ consciousness. And believe me, he had plenty of practice because, he spent 30 years with Krishnamurti as his student. And then he spent those last years with Dr. Shukman, I think it was like 2.5 years where he called her every day, but it might've been a little more than that. So he had at least 3 or 4 years with Dr. Shukman. And then he developed that kind of connection with his source energy. And this is what the Course in Miracles is teaching us. That's the whole purpose of it, is for us to connect with our source energy, and the Christ is the teacher, right? Not that he's the only teacher in the world, but if we're studying the Course, he's the teacher and he's our teacher. And that's the point he's trying to make with us. is so we have our own divine connection. We have our own, how should I say, stillness of the peace of God. You know, that's in that set of lessons too. 271, 273. The stillness of the peace of God is mine. Well, you can't say that unless you have it, right? We can't fake it. The stillness of the peace of God is mine. It would have to be so. It would have to be ours. We would have to feel it. We would have to be still. Truth corrects all errors in my mind. Well, what are the errors in my mind? Non-stillness, non-peace, non-love. These ideas of sacrifice, these ideas of conflict, these ideas of, oh, I've got to get something, I've got to give something to get something. All that sacrifice, that's not a still mind. But then, fortunately, the Course in Miracles undoes it, undoes those misperceptions in our mind that keep it preoccupied, right? And undoes them very well if we're attentive. Okay, where are the areas in my life where I'm sacrificing, or I feel sacrifice, or I feel resentment because I'm giving too much? That would be sacrifice, right? So where are those areas in my mind that I need to let go? And then, you know, as you let go, then the stillness comes in. The stillness of the peace of God is mine. So what would you rather have? The stillness or the irritation? The stillness or the defense? I guess if left up to me, this friend of ours that we called yesterday, who kind of told us that we were over the hill and our stuff had no pertinence anymore, I guess the best thing that would have happened was for us not even to call him, because I knew I saw that was going to be the theme, right? Because that was always the theme before, of him telling us that we were not keeping up with the current systems and that our work wasn't relevant anymore. And I knew that would be the theme of the conversation. So why did we even call him? I don't know. So the best thing would be let those people go that are thinking in a different mindset to us. I mean, I'm not saying his mindset is off. For him, it's right on, but for us, it's not on, you know? And then furthermore, you know, the more I study the Course in Miracles, the more I see this relationship that we have to have with the Christ is essential. But on some other level, it makes me a little gun shy to put it out, because what's the difference between that and organized religion that says, you know, if you don't believe in Christ, you're going to hell, you know, like it's like we want to put out there that the Christ is essential in our contact and study with the Course, but we don't want to be fanatic about it. Like there's no other way people can reach God. No, it's just if we're a student of the Course in Miracles and we see what it's actually saying and the dynamics of it, there is a point where you have to have this direct relationship, right? I guess the only difference would be the Course doesn't require any middle person. That's how it's different. You go to an organized church or a religion, and there are many middle people that you have to go through. There's a priest, there's a imam, there's a pope, there's a this, there's a that. And they have this notion that they're more connected than you, and you have to get your connection through them. Well, the Course in Miracles undoes that whole thing. It's a direct relationship. You don't need a middle person, not even me. I might be helpful in explaining things a certain way where you can have a deeper relationship with the Course, but it's not like I'm in the middle. I'm there kind of cheerleading you on to go deeper, go more with more connection, go with more seriousness to make the connection. And that's my job. And I'm glad to do it, because in speaking these words, I get closer myself to that connection. So it's a collaborative venture. We're holding hands together in a collaborative action to all make contact, each of us, with this energy of this higher self. And we do that together. And as a group, it makes it easier and more fun, maybe. And maybe that was the purpose of an original church. It wasn't to set somebody up and say, oh, they know more than us. And I don't even think Jesus would have done that with the people that he healed. He never set even himself up on a pedestal. He would have just said, well, I'm like everybody else, and I have all these things to undo like everyone else. And I've risen above it. And I know what it feels like to rise above all that stuff of the ego. And because I've done it, I can help others do it. But he never made himself better for that. Because essentially, he knew everyone has the Christ in them. Everyone. It's like I was saying when I woke up this morning, and I says, Muhammad is in you. He's nowhere else. And the Christ is in you, nowhere else. And what would wake that up in us? What would wake that up? And I don't know of anything better than the Course in Miracles to wake that up, because I trust, now this could just be my, quote, belief system, but I don't think it's a belief. I trust that every word in the Course in Miracles has come from the Christ consciousness. I really do trust that when Dr. Schuchman heard the voice, it really was Jesus talking to her, and it really was the Christ consciousness talking to her, and that verbatim, that's what we have. And aren't we fortunate to live in this age where we have that? And we're the first generation really to receive it. So we have a great responsibility to treat it with the reverence of what it is. And I'll be for sure committed to that for the rest of my life. And I don't see that as ever being irrelevant or going out of style or, quote unquote, not appealing to the millennials or not appealing to the new generations. I mean, the new generations may have their discoveries, and that's all well and good, but wisdom doesn't rely on generations. It transcends generations. Walt Whitman is this poet we have in America, and he was very enlightened. And he wrote this one, I remember he wrote this line, age vexes age. Well, what's that mean? Vex, it means one age comes and then another age comes that has a different way, and it sort of overrides the age before. Age vexes age. Like the Roman Empire came, and then something else came after, then the British Empire, and then the British Empire goes down, and then there's the American Empire, and then now that's going down, so age vexes age. But then he was saying wisdom is timeless. Nothing ever trumps wisdom. If it's a truth, it's true forever. And I feel that way with the Course. If it's a truth, it's true forever, and it's not affected by time. It's not affected by this age versus that age. I mean, the Christ is going to be around for forever. The Christ consciousness. The Buddha is going to be around forever. Muhammad's going to be around forever. But now, how do we relate to that? Well, the Christ is in you. The Buddha is in you. Muhammad is in you. And do we want to wake that up? Because major portion of us are asleep. We've been conditioned this way, that way, these family patterns, these cultural patterns, these economic patterns, whatever they are. We've been conditioned. And this consciousness requires that we be not conditioned by anything. And that requires we let go of a lot of stuff, beliefs, projections, notions of sacrifice, fear, guilt, and anger in our own personality, all of that. Basically, thought itself. I felt really fortunate to have Tara Singh because he had been Krishnamurti's student for all those years. He got us to read and listen to Krishnamurti. Well, then I saw, it could be that the Course in Miracles came about because Krishnamurti had done the work that he had done preparing the way. And what do I mean by that? Well, Krishnamurti's most poignant teaching was that we think knowledge is what's going to improve humanity. All right? Go to school, get an education, learn this, memorize this. And he was saying that knowledge is made up of thought. Knowledge is thought. It's an accumulation of thought. Like we have an experience, then we form thoughts about it, or we write down thoughts about it. And then we accumulate all that through memory. And the general accumulation of human memory we call knowledge, right? And there's some notion that if we know enough, we're gonna free ourselves from suffering. Well, he said that knowledge and thought are the very source of the suffering. And they will never free us from it because inherently in the thought is the conflict, is the duality, and is what produces suffering. Because it's also related to time. Oh, I don't know enough now, but in the future, I'll know enough later. Well, that requires time, and we never really get there. We never do know enough, so to speak. So that's an illusion. Knowledge is an illusion. And this is what Krishnamurti taught for 60 years and got across very well, especially anybody that listens to him or reads him, that's the theme. Well, now, okay, fast forward now to A Course in Miracles. What does it start with? It starts exactly where Krishnamurti left off. Nothing I see means anything. My thoughts don't mean anything. What I think I know and understand doesn't mean anything. So there's a contact beyond thought where this Christ consciousness abides, right? But we have to leave the thought behind before we can make that contact. So Krishnamurti laid that groundwork for us to be able to let go of thought, let go of this notion of progress. You know, Krishnamurti would say, well, what's the progress between the invention of the bow and arrow and the invention of the nuclear bomb? What is the progress? You tell me. Well, we have to see it's almost like backward. It's a devolution, not an evolution, right? We've just invented better means to kill each other. And there's been no progress in the human consciousness for 50,000 years between the invention of the bow and arrow and the nuclear bomb. So, because that kind of progress, so to speak, would require that we step outside the field of the known. And that's where the Course in Miracles starts. Nothing I see means anything. My thoughts do not mean anything. I'm preoccupied with the past. The past is over, but I'm still stuck there. Nothing I see now. Am I really seeing it because I'm seeing it through the past, the filter of the past? And it's trying to help us let go of that. My meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world because it's in the past. So this is where we need to approach making this contact with the Christ when we've adequately emptied our mind enough and stilled our mind enough that we see our own thought is the block. Our own thought is the block. And you'll say, well, how do I stop my thought? Well, you have to first be willing to look at it and stop it. And then you notice how habitual it is. You sit down to meditate and your mind is going 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? And you say, well, I know I have to still my mind. Well, you can't seem to do it. But that's the issue. And when you're serious, the Holy Spirit will help you. The Holy Spirit will help you let go. The Holy Spirit will slow your thought down. Think of it this way. This is how Tara Singh explained it. Thought is like a bead on a chain or on a mala, right? You got a thought, then you got a gap, then you got another bead, another thought, gap, bead. So most of us, the beads are real close together and we have thought, 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 thought. Well, when you sit down and you quiet yourself, you have a thought, then you have a gap, then you have a thought and a gap. And at some point, by observing your mind, the gap gets wider, right? So instead of thought, 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 you have thought, gap, thought, gap. Then you have thought, gap, thought, gap. And the gap gets bigger. The gap, by giving attention to this, the gap gets wider until you're more with the space and the emptiness than you are with the thought. And then that's where you make the contact with the Christ. And that's where you read the lesson or you read the thing in the text. And it's in that space, the stillness of the peace of God, right? That's where you have the contact. And you've done the work. And then you know whatever you read that Christ is going to tell you, you have no doubt in your mind that that's true words, holy words. It's like nectar. It's like you receive the nectar of the word. And it's a blessing. It's such a blessing. And we can all do this. It's not hard. You just have to know what the approach is. And I just gave you the approach. So it's so nice to be with you. Yeah, and I'm kind of sorry. I had a little bit of a reaction to that guy yesterday. But somebody that tells you your work is irrelevant, you have to be pretty balanced not to have a reaction, and especially if you're trying to mend a relationship, that you're trying to kind of retrieve it from the past. But I saw, nah, he's going to go on thinking like that, and we're going to go on doing our work, and nary the two will meet. And we don't really care about, if this is marketable, if this is that. We make enough money doing what we do to do what we do, and we feel it's all provided. So who has to worry about that? And if we're not making $2 million doing it, who cares? We always pay our bills. We have never missed a meal. And we always have the money to pay for the flights and everything, no matter where we're going. So where's the problem? I see that as divine abundance, and it's all provided. And I don't have to think about, quote unquote, marketing myself. So hallelujah. Well, that's it today. I talked more than I thought I would. And God bless you all. Thanks for coming. And we'll keep the podcast going. And we'll be broadcasting same time next week, but from Valencia, Spain. So we'll see you from Valencia next week. All right? All right. God bless you all. Yep. Thanks.